Hey everybody, Professor Snart checking in again. A little more typical video announcement or check-in here, where instead of, me on screen, it's actually our course on screen. So I just have a little window open on my desktop, and it's obviously my voice, which is slowly recovering, but still sounds a little weird, at least to me. So it'll get better. It'll also help, I think, to keep this a little bit short for my voice, but also for your benefit as well. So just a really quick check-in. Hopefully you're getting comfortable with navigating our course, kind of getting the sense of how it's all set up, even though we haven't done a lot of like English 1102 content type things. So again, you've worked through the orientation material, really kind of generic about being a successful online learner. Notice that there's a quiz that's part of that. It's very few points in the overall scheme of things. So I think it's 10 out of the 1,000 for our course. But it is kind of indicative to me if I'm noticing that people have not done that, because it's just showing the degree to which you're maybe like paying attention versus not paying attention, working through material. So grade-wise, like in a really practical way, it doesn't have a huge impact, but it certainly like does raise a bit of a red flag if you're not seeing that and not completing it. And one of the things that I think is a habit for some students is that in an effort to work efficiently, what they think is quickly, they will pop into where they know the work is. So we're going to go into a unit. We'll go into unit 1, let's say. We're going to skip all this stuff. We'll just go into here, right, as quickly as possible. Where's the thing that I need to do? Okay, here's the discussion board. I'll just sort of skip the instructions and I'll do it. That's an exaggerated, I think, case, but based on, again, certainly a minority of the cases, it does seem that people jump into the what do I have to do before actually reading the instructions or taking their time to work through course content. It's the equivalent of, not showing up to your face-to-face class until it's midterm or final, and then showing up that day and hoping to do well on the test. It's possible, sort of, but not very likely. So again, make sure that you're taking your time with our course, and something I always tell students to do, even or especially when you're doing online, is just like you would if you keep like a calendar, whether it's physical or digital or both. If you have a face-to-face class Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10 to 10:50, you block that time out. You don't also schedule work or mowing the lawn or taking the kids somewhere or doing laundry or the million other things that it seems like when it's an online class, people don't block out any time where they just have to devote time to doing the class. So it's always competing with other things. It gets sort of shuffled to the bottom of the to-do list. And again, that's when people start kind of skipping the instructions, or especially as we get further on into more of our content units, right? Skipping the content, be like, oh, paragraph assignment, I'll just go right into here, I'll do that. Well, you've skipped all the classes where you're sort of taught or introduced to the expectations for that and then trying to do the work, and it rarely is that successful. So sometimes you feel like you're working efficiently or quickly, but not successfully. So again, be sure that you're taking time and literally block out some time in your schedule. The nice part is that, unlike with the face-to-face class, instead of me or the institution telling you it must be Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10 a.m., you can decide, well, what works for my schedule is Monday at 4 p.m. or Tuesday at 6:30 a.m., whatever flexibility works for you. But you're still like literally blocking out that time. And it doesn't need to be hours on end, but it should be a couple of blocks throughout the week where that's your online course time, not when you online course and do a few things around the house, or and you're at work, or and the other things that we would never expect ourselves to do if we were sitting in class, right? So the same kind of expectations should hold. And really, you're sort of doing yourself a favor, like you're legitimizing the fact that you're in an actual class that takes time and work. You shouldn't expect yourself, and other people shouldn't expect you either, just because you're not physically required to be in a classroom by an institution because you've signed up for the face-to-face class. It doesn't mean that it's easier, or you can spend less time doing it, or it doesn't need the same attention that you would give that face-to-face class. So again, do yourself a favor and really make an effort to block that time out. Okay, so back to where we're at. The orientation stuff, including that quiz. Unit 1 has us doing a home page, which you can start to see people have completed here. If you go into it and then, I don't know if it'll show up on the view here, you can sort of see it on the side. I don't like the fact that it just shows up and it looks like nothing's happened here. That's no fun. But if you pull these down, you'll see a bunch of our classmates having finished this already. And you can obviously look at anybody else's, and that's kind of the point, right, is to take a look and see if there's some shared interests, shared backgrounds, shared career goals or educational goals, any of that kind of stuff. And also as part of Unit 1, which I'll go into directly here, is our first discussion board, remembering to do obviously your initial post, but also replying to classmates, right? That's an important part of it. Again, just kind of getting to know each other, feeling like we're an actual class, we're actual people, we're not just out in cyberspace somewhere, or it's just you doing almost like a correspondence school kind of a thing. We definitely don't want it to feel that way. Okay, what else? Back into Unit 1 here. There's also a brief questionnaire that I'd like you to fill out. It's ungraded. You can do it right here in Blackboard. Just kind of getting your sense of like what are your expectations or what's your understanding of taking an online course, and is there anything not even specific to composition, but just kind of like from the technology standpoint or life situation maybe or whatever that you feel like might get in the way of your success. And for most people, they're pretty good to go. That's what I want to hear. But if there are other things, you know, things that you're concerned about, definitely we want to talk about that and address those as soon as we can. This is this isn't shared with anybody else. It's just between you and I, so you don't have to worry about this becoming like a public discussion forum kind of a thing. Okay, so let's take a quick look at our due dates. Obviously, one of the most important links here, almost where you want to go every time you're into Blackboard in our course, just so, again, you're reminding yourself of what's coming up. So Thursday, August 25th. Noting, again, that for discussion boards, we have a noon due date for initial posts, replies due by the end of that day to make sure people are, you know, getting things done in a timely manner. And then obviously you want to look ahead to future due dates. And I've tried to keep them fairly regular as far as like a Monday-Thursday split. We get a little bit off just because that Monday's a Labor Day down here, but we try to keep it fairly consistent. Helps with scheduling, you know, blocking out those times and that kind of stuff. So definitely be aware of upcoming due dates, but I would caution against trying to work too far ahead, which is what I've seen some people do as well, especially because our course is, you know, primarily discussion board based, especially as we get underway here. I've seen, you know, a few times people in an effort to get ahead, they jump in and do this and this way ahead of the due date, which, okay, as long, again, as you're working through the content, so you're actually doing things correctly. But then because they've done things so far in advance, they actually forget to do like discussion board replies. So they're getting a pretty bad grade only because, right, they just forgot to do part of the assignment. It's not that they don't understand or have some other thing going on. It's just this really practical, like, you missed the due date, which is definitely not how you want to be losing points in a course like this. So be aware of those due dates. Coming up onto Unit 2 then, we'll take a really quick look in there. So again, some preliminary discussion kind of a thing. There's a little bit on plagiarism, which is really important for our purposes. We address it here in this very kind of narrow, almost a sort of black and white kind of a way. But where it really matters is obviously when we're doing our major essays. And despite the way that they try to parse it out here, when it comes to writing our essays, it's pretty clear that, you know, when you quote from a primary text, you have to cite it. You're obviously not just lifting, you know, ideas from other websites. So it's not quite as nuanced maybe for our actual practical purposes as even it's made out to be here. But at least it's drawing your attention to it. It covers it as far as something that we've now talked about in the class or will have once we've done that. So there's no, oh, I didn't understand, or oh, we didn't cover that, or whatever. So it's really a little bit perfunctory here, but at least it gets it out there, out of the way, and then we can move on to more interesting things. The essays that we'll write are obviously going to be literary analyses. You can probably guess that based on our textbook, that Intro to Lit book. So there's a brief set of handouts here and a quiz. Again, it's open book. It's really not meant to be a a challenging activity so much as just one that gets you thinking in literary terms, and nothing really super sophisticated or jargony. Basic terms that are going to help us write more effectively as we move throughout our course. In fact, one of the things that I want you to keep in mind is that even when we do stuff like this little one-off plagiarism thing or a little quiz here, really minor points in the bigger scheme of things, but we're always trying to scaffold what we're doing to those major point assignments. So this might be like a 10-point quiz, for example, or this is a 10-point quiz, but it's moving us toward, or it's a piece of that puzzle that's the 100 or 200-point essay. Obviously, that's where you want to bring the pieces together. Sometimes I know it can feel like why am I doing this? It's just busy work. It's something that, it's just a few minutes of my time. It doesn't seem connected. So always try to feel like these are building us towards those bigger point assignments. So if we don't do them in a small format here, then you're doing them for the first time when there's much more in the way of points riding on it. So it's way better to do it, and even if you get it sort of screwed up and wrong, you figure out why and you learn from it, and you've lost like 4 points out of 1,000 instead of a lot more out of 1,000. So always try to keep that bigger picture in mind. And then we have our discussion board here, a first reading from our textbook, the What is Literature? Again, just kind of getting us thinking about the idea of literature, that term, baggage that goes along with it. Again, you're doing your own post, right, by the noon of that due date, responding to at least 2 other posts. And it's probably worth then, if you haven't done so already, reviewing our grading guidelines especially as discussion boards go, like what's a really good discussion board post, what's kind of a mediocre one, and then what's not gonna cut it. So we all kind of know this. I mean, let's not pretend we don't. The yeah, I agree, or okay sort of a thing, that's 0. That's not just like mediocre, that's like no effort whatsoever. Sort of a bit of an effort, right? That's a bit of the grade that you'll get then. The really good discussion board post, and it varies a little bit depending on the content, but the really good discussion board post is the one where you present a clear idea or opinion of your own. It's well thought out. It's supported maybe by a quotation from whatever the reading is. But the really, really good post is pulling, right, many pieces together. It's your own opinion, your own ideas, maybe your own experience, like with something that you've read before or encountered before. It's quoting not just from the single reading, but maybe from other course materials or other things that you're familiar with. A good response then does the same thing, where it's bringing together multiple threads. And that's really like the exemplary post, the really, really good one. Anything that's below that, again, is, even if it's competent, it could be, right, getting the job done, but just because you've met the basic requirements, that's not a full point A situation. We want to reserve that for those that really do sort of go above and beyond. So obviously be reading, right, the individual assignment, but you can also refer back to the grading guidelines to get a more kind of global overview of what that exemplary post might look like, what the competent one, the one that meets requirements, and then sort of on down the list. Okay, so the last thing that I'll leave you with as we get further into our course here and more of those quizzes, discussion boards, all of that work, is if you have questions, by all means, right, send me an email and I'll try to get back to you right away. I tend to be one of those people that likes to answer immediately rather than letting it sit there. That just like sits in my mind and it drives me nuts kind of. But as we move forward, really do consider like how many points out of the whole 1,000 that we're talking about. You don't want to get too hung up or too stressed, too nerve-wracked over 5 points out of 1,000. So let's say you did a quiz out of 10 points and you got 5 out of 10. That's like 50, not very good if you do the percentage in the letter grade. But as long as you learn from those basic mistakes, you're really talking about 5 out of 1,000. It'll have almost no impact at the end of the day on your overall grade. I know it's easy for me to say because I'm not on the grade receiving end, but it does, I think, help to de-stress things a little bit. And it really allows you as the student to sort of get out of your own way. Sometimes we get so caught up in the every little point kind of a thing that we miss the bigger picture. And instead of learning like that scaffolding thing towards success in an essay, we get hung up on points. So do your best not to. But again, obviously, if you have questions, just reach out to me and I'll get back to you right away. Okay, so be sure you're on target to finish up Unit 1 by that due date, and then we'll turn around and move into Unit 2. I'll talk to everybody soon. So much for keeping it short, right? Sorry.